Dave, thanks very much for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time out to do this video for the Dyslexia Association of Ireland. We're just going to start, if you could just tell me about your experience of dyslexia.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. Genuinely, I really appreciate this platform to talk and share about kind of little bits about my journey. I suppose what really resonates with me, where my journey began, and it sits with me quite easily. I think I was around 8 years of age in school, and I was asked up by my teacher to come up to the top of the class to read out a page. This was many years ago in the late 70s, and so you stood up in front of the class, and I remember having the piece of paper in my hand, and I was reading it, and I kept missing, and I kept stuttering, and I kept missing bits. And I was conscious that people were starting to laugh. Now, I didn't really mind kids laughing because it was useful, but then I looked over and I saw the teacher was laughing too. And in the middle of me talking, she just said to me, "Look, just sit down," something like that, real dismissive. And I kind of went down and sat in my chair, and I just felt, even at that age, I remember saying to myself, "That's it." I was that young, and I remember genuinely saying to myself, in more or less the terms of, "That's it. I'm not good at this. School is not for me. I'm not. I didn't use the word academic. I wouldn't have known it back then, but I remember saying, "That's it. I'm obviously thick and stupid," and because they were the words that would have been used. And I kind of started detaching from school from then, believe it or not. I was then in what they called back then was special English and special maths classes, and I hadn't a clue why. And I remember, like, most of the kids in there, when I look back on it now, including myself, had kind of other disruptive things going on. They were quite, there were, some of them were quite hyperactive, and it was a weird place to be in because I didn't know why I was there, and I didn't know why I wasn't in English like everybody else, and I wasn't in maths. And then my friends used to say to me, "How come you're in the special class?" And I was like, "I don't know." You know what I mean? I genuinely didn't know. And I'd struggled with most of my kind of school life with tests, exams, spelling. Particularly then, I used to dread tests, like genuinely the night before tests and that, and I used to physically get sick. That's how anxious I was. I hated school, just to put it into perspective. Like, I absolutely detested going to school, especially in junior school, mainly because in secondary school, I came into my own in sports, and I was able to hide in that space. But in junior school, I wasn't, and I absolutely hated it. Like, when you woke up and school was cancelled for any reason, so every day going to school, I was anxious, and I genuinely was. And looking back on it now, and I used to sort of have that massive fear. Friday was the best time ever. When you left school, Sunday evening, I started to feel anxious again, and I carried that with me through most of my school life. And I just detached from, and I really love learning, and I really love learning about stuff, but I felt I was thick and I was stupid, because that's genuinely what I was told. And I was told so many times by different teachers or different people that I just did actually believe it. And I said, right, this isn't for me. So secondary school, I hid out quite a lot, because in sport, I was quite sporty, so I was able to play a wide variety of sports, and that's where I felt comfortable and happy, when I was doing something on a pitch, or when I was running, or when I was in a sporting arena, because I didn't have to worry about any of that, and I knew I was good at it, and I knew I got time off school to do it. So I hid out a lot with that. I don't know how I got away with exams and stuff like that, because I really struggled with most of them, particularly the likes of, like, French just made no sense to me. Languages I couldn't fathom at all. And, like, I did technical drawing for my junior cert, and I'm not messing when I say I didn't understand one word of it. Like, none of it. Between the drawings and the numbers, I couldn't figure it out. Then even I did metalwork as well, and in metalwork again, I couldn't figure out dimensions. Like, and everyone was making amazing things, and I used to get some of the lads who made amazing stuff, and I'd get theirs and bring it up to get marked, and I used to get a lower mark than them every time, even though it was exactly the same. But I did okay in the likes of, for example, history, because I loved it. So I was able to, like, get a C. A C for me was a great result. Geography was the same, because I was passionate about it and I liked it. And then in fifth year, I had to transition into home economics, because I couldn't figure out the technical stuff at all. And home economics was okay to get away with stuff, but I was getting a lot of stick, back in them days. Like, men didn't really do home economics. I was like, home economics? It's like, yeah, but it was the only place I could feel safe, because I felt I could do it. So in school, I detached exams. I didn't really do a whole lot. I didn't do anything for my junior cert. I passed it just about. I got a couple of no grades and all in subjects. And that's when I really started to get alarm bells going in my own head, going, there's something. And I look back on it now, and I had massive attention issues. I had massive issues around structuring stuff, even trying to structure for a junior cert. When I look at it now, like with different subjects, I couldn't even fathom it. And other people have big charts and they're color coded, and I was like, I can't even, like, I could barely remember sometimes what exam was on the day. And I just felt this huge pressure going into exams because I knew I was going to struggle no matter how much studying I did. I knew I couldn't retain lots of information like other people, and I switched off. I genuinely switched off from school, and just assumed I was stupid and thick, and that I wasn't. And the funny thing is, what really threw me was I read a lot of books. I always did. I always do. I still do. I go through a phase of reading a phenomenal amount of books, and because I could read books, I never thought there was an issue, and it never really triggered with me. Mad as that sounds. And the same with the maths and any of the number stuff. I didn't really, because I just said, look, I just don't get it. So my school journey was great crack. I really enjoyed it, but there was so much anxiety, so much fear, and it was a complete waste of a journey for me because I felt completely outside the majority of the other students in there, and that there was something wrong with me all the way through, even though I didn't know what that was. I think, and that sort of, and then, so I suppose to flip it, then I entered the workplace, and I got an apprenticeship as a plumber, believe it or not, and that made even less sense because that's the technical drawing. That's, I couldn't figure any of that out, and I felt, that's when I felt really low on myself again, because it was like, like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I? The rest of them are able to bend on pipes and drawings, and I couldn't figure any of it out. And I was like, great, that didn't work out, and then I ended up getting a job, and I did okay in jobs. I was kind of always a supervisor or manager, so I was good with people, and again, that's something, a skill that I hugely had to learn because I struggled academically. Was I was very good with people, and I was very articulate. I used a lot of words to make it sound like I was super intelligent, and that's how I hid, and it worked for me because a lot of people would have said, "Oh, you're very smart, you're very," but I was very driven as well because, and I did quite well in work, but then again, when it came to doing tests or writing stuff, or I did a lot of training. I actually used to teach training and development for quite a while, and I'd put together PowerPoints and I'd stick it up, and there'd be huge big spelling mistakes that people would spot, and I wouldn't even see them. I was like, all right. And I used to laugh and just say, it's the secretary, there was none. But that's how I masked it. And I used to get fearful doing presentations and stuff, not because of the presentation, but because of the content. Had I done it right, had I put stuff up right. And eventually, I suppose, fast forward to, so I hit a lot in work too, and I knew there was an issue even structurally with work, and trying to organize stuff and trying to my concentration level is absolutely shocking. Anything distracts me, and that was a problem. And even when I'm doing exercises or something like that, I have to do them in chunks at certain times, and I know now that works for me. But I wanted to go to college for years and years and years, and I just felt, no, I can't. I'm not, I'm not there. I'm not intelligent enough. I'm gonna get found out. And eventually, I suppose, I am in college now. I'm doing the second year degree in counselling and psychotherapy, and I'll get into that journey in a bit, which if you want. But like, the reason I am there is because I found out that I had it in 2018. I went and got a test, and the reason I got a test was because I was in a different job, and I kept sending emails to my boss, who was really pernickety, and he started calling me down at one stage and red circling emails with words that were spelt wrong, and I felt like the lowest human being of all time. I genuinely just felt absolutely humiliated. Like, and this was a fairly high up job, and I was like, what? And actually, in fairness, now when I look back, if it wasn't for that, I probably mightn't have gone and got a test. But I just felt, I said, there's something wrong. And I used to use spell check and all, so I was like, this doesn't make sense. So it was the context of a lot of words. For example, it would have been the likes of shopping center versus center. I would have mixed that up completely, and I wouldn't have seen it in woman, women. I can't. There's loads of them similar trigger words that I wouldn't see, and that's what kept jumping out. And even the structure, I started to notice when I started using the Google or the dictate, and it started getting read back to me. I'd look at the sentences and think they were amazing, and then I'd get them read back and I would go, that doesn't make any sense. So it was just structural stuff started to pop up. And then I said, right, I better go and I better figure this out because I need to get a test because I genuinely think there's something wrong here.
And can you tell us a bit about your experience of getting an assessment as an adult? And I suppose if there was any kind of thoughts and feelings around getting that identification of dyslexia, to have that word, what was that like for you?
Yeah, it brings me back. I get a little bit emotional now, even just thinking about it, because I remember ringing up and I started looking up dyslexia and I started looking up um, signs and symptoms and that type of thing. And I started going, And then I was speaking to someone on the phone, and in fairness, the association was incredible, really supportive, and really kind of made me feel at ease that and that's why I think organizations like yourselves are so important, just for the likes of me who is on the end of the phone kind of terrified going, and I just felt at ease. And even then the person on the end of the phone said to me, look, by what you're telling me, it looks like you possibly might have, but we need to get a test to confirm. So I said, right, look, I just booked one and I went in, and I was terrified. I'll be honest with you, I was terrified. I don't know why I was terrified. I just felt I was just terrified. I didn't want that label thrown on me. So I went and I did the test, and the test was the way the test was run was really supportive, and I felt really safe in that, and the person that did it was lovely and really supportive, and it helped. But I found it really difficult. Certain sections of it, I really struggled, and it started to trigger school all over again. Even though it was a safe environment. And then I said, right, and look, we went through the results, and he spoke to me after, and then we went through it, and in one hand I was absolutely liberated that I had got dyslexia, and on the other hand I was devastated that I think what really struck me and what really hits me now is that it took so long to kind of go and do something about it to get a diagnosis, and I've held myself back for so long as a result of it. But when I got the result and I read through it and I looked at the different markers and the types, it all made sense, and it was just liberating. And I just said to myself, right, it's actually inspired me to do the opposite now, to go to college to learn. But the initial really affected me, and it stuck with me for quite a while. And then the hardest bit then for me was I suppose telling people. Like, my family was okay. There was no surprise from them. Like, my two kids were amazing. I sent them a message and they were like, we're shocked. Do you ever read some of your text messages in a jokey way? Do you know what I mean? And that helped. The jokey bit of, and the same with some of my family members are like, oh, really? And I was like, when I look at my text messages, they're all over the place. But that made me laugh, and that gave me comfort in the closeness of a family. But I found it, and I still struggle with workplaces, and I struggle with college, and I struggle with telling people. It's not that I feel, and I've learned so much from so many other people, including Keith Murphy, who you know well. He's an inspiration to me, and some of the things that he says that stick out to me. It's just that we learn differently. We do things different, and that's where I'm at now with it. I fully accepted it. In fact, my friends now are nearly sick of me because they kind of use it, and they kind of go, "Don't use dyslexia. You can't use dyslexia for everything." And I was like, "But now it all makes sense." So I still struggle with telling, especially in a workplace, because I feel there's a bit of a stigma attached to it, and I think there's still a bit of work to be done around that. I mean, it's definitely much more acceptable now than it was, and having the diagnosis really helps. But I feel in college sometimes, even when I'm talking about, or I say it when I have to do an assignment, that I'm looking for special favors, or I'm looking for something special, that, and it's not that at all. It's just that sometimes it takes me probably 5 times longer than someone else to do an assignment because of the way I process it and I do it. So I suppose finding out was liberating, very emotional, and I'm delighted that I did it. But then I was, as I said, I got really annoyed with not annoyed, but I was quite that it took so long. Like, I was 45, I think, or 46 when I found out. Like, and I was annoyed then at different stages of school that no one picked it up. Now I know it was a different generation, but still, there was so many glaring signs when I look back on it now. But then I hid it very well, and I was able to hide, and that I masked it very well.
And I suppose at DAI, we kind of refer to that as a roller coaster of emotions that come with getting that identification a little bit later in life, where like there is that instant relief. Now you have a word for it to explain some of those difficulties. You might feel a bit of relief, but then, the kind of reflection that takes place after, again, maybe a sense of anger, saying, why didn't school see that something was wrong here? And it definitely, there's peaks and troughs along the journey, and there's no kind of like, right, I get my bit of paper and now everything's sorted. It's definitely a process that you have to go through. And sometimes people are
Mhm.
surprised by those emotions that kind of crop up now and again. And again, like you mentioned earlier, some of those more triggering environments, like that fear of disclosing, because you're putting yourself in that vulnerable position again. And I suppose those experiences of school, and that negative self-talk that can really just stay with the person. So those feelings and emotions, like they're really typical of um that identification later in life.
And I
And
can be brought back to that day in that school when I was a child, and I can see it now as if it was yesterday.
mm,
Genuinely, and then words and that person laughing affected me my entire life. Genuinely, like that's how that clear I can remember that moment at that young age as a young boy, and how words and images affect you for a lifetime. And it really, really did affect me for a lifetime.
And I suppose you mentioned there about like that you're studying now, and that with work as well. Are there any strategies that you find are useful for you in supporting your dyslexic profile when you're studying or working?
I suppose I've learned a lot now that I'm aware of it. So I've studied and I've listened and I get inspiration from so many different people who also would be diagnosed with dyslexia and how they do things. But for me, one of the key things for me is, first of all, having the bravery to go back to college and say, right, this isn't going to hold me back anymore. I'm stepping into this arena. It's where I belong. I might do things differently and learn things differently, but this is where I belong. And even in that different space, the likes of, for example, I can't absorb information off a PowerPoint slide that's full of information. I can't. I'd need to watch. I'm a visual learner. That's the way I take on most of my information. I know that now. So if something is content heavy, I have to go and maybe watch a video or try and read a little section of it myself. I can't take in all that information together. I used to start taking loads of notes, and now I found it's counterproductive because I'm not really paying attention and I can't actually read half of what I write most of the time. So now, kind of what I do is I can only learn in certain blocks and chunks, which is fine. When I'm doing assessments or assignments, I have to be on my own. I have to be in a quiet environment. I can't have any distractions. And I've now learned I use Grammarly all the time. I use Google Edit all the time. I use the word editor where it reads it back to you so I can actually hear the sentence back. Um, I also can only do blocks of 20 minutes, and I know that now, and that's okay. That used to really frustrate me. I'd see people who'd be doing assignments and they'd be 3 hours in, they haven't even stopped to breathe. And I'm like, what? I've gone to the toilet twice, I've made 3 cups of tea, but I can 20-minute chunks is all I can do. And that's okay because I've accepted that now. And then I go back over it, and then I go back over. And I actually, believe it or not, and I don't know why I do this, I sometimes write a whole assignment and delete the whole thing and do it all over again. And I could do that 4 or 5 times. And I'm learning my assignment style now at the moment. But there's a lot of tricks for me with the likes of Grammarly, with the likes of the reading particular bit when I can hear it back. I sometimes get someone to proofread stuff if I can, but I don't want to be relying on people all the time. But I think the number one is a quiet environment and to plan. I really have to. Sometimes I print off reams of stuff and that's all over the desk and it looks and I just take 2 sections out of each. But now, instead of trying to read a whole academic journal, I'll read the intro, I'll read the profile, I'll read the conclusion, and then I know what it's about, and then it's gone. So I've sneaky little ways now which work, and I genuinely find I'm getting better at assignments. I'm getting better at structuring them. I'm getting better at doing them, and the dyslexia isn't as much of an issue now because I know what works for me, and the reason I know what works for me is because of the Dyslexia Association. I've read all the stuff. I've been to a couple of seminars. I've gone to a couple of talks. I've got as much information as I can about adult dyslexia to give myself the best chance to be able to try and submit. I'm never expecting to hand in assignments and I get a top mark. That doesn't interest me at all. If I got it, great. But for me, it's getting a pass is all I want, to pass to go on to the next one. That's where I have my bench, and that's enough for me. And also letting them know that I have dyslexia, so that they're aware that it mightn't be 100% with grammar and stuff, but there's reasons for it, and that helps me too.
And does that disclosure piece get easier the more that you do it? Or is it still always a bit of a struggle? Does it
It's a good
depend on the environment, or does it depend on the person, or the how safe the environment is, or does it ever get easier, or is it still a
it's a
struggle?
good question. I have to say it's a good question, and I don't, I've probably too. Does it get easier? No, is the honest answer. What's in my gut now as I'm saying it is no, it doesn't. And I feel, as I said earlier, that sometimes I'm saying it because I'm looking for something extra. I'm looking for, like, extensions on assignments, or I'm looking for, an extra grade. So it doesn't. And I get annoyed sometimes that I have to say it, because I get annoyed with me, not more with myself, because I feel like I have to say that I have it, and then it looks like I'm looking for something when I'm not. I suppose with family and friends who've been so supportive and been amazing, telling them is okay. But in the workplace, like if I switched jobs and started a new one, I'd still have that anxiety about telling the next person and the next person. And there's another in the academia world, I still struggle a little bit too. Yeah, to be honest, I do.
I suppose that's very relatable as well for adults. Um, they're afraid, like, if I'm in a job for years and if I disclose now, they're going to take some of my tasks away from me, or I won't be able to go for that supervisor management role because I have dyslexia. Or likewise, you might find people. They might want to disclose at the interview stage, so it's very personal and it's very complicated and it's very individual to each person, but also, as you say, for each job that you go into, it really, there's so many factors that it definitely depends on. There's no straightforward answer. And I know we would hear a lot from employers saying we want people to disclose, we want to know, we want to support, but there's no overnight solution. It's a lot of kind of structural changes, a lot of kind of cultural changes that need to take place before people can feel safe, before, like, especially in a workplace, an environment is created where people can be themselves and neurodiversity is celebrated. So I suppose there's a bit of a way to go, isn't there, with that
I
too?
definitely think it's come a long way, but I do feel it's a long, long way to go. I think the generation coming up now, there's much more structures and supports for them, and an awareness around it, and neurodiversity, as you say, and much more supports. But and it's great to see, but I still think there's a long way to go where you can walk into a workplace and say I have dyslexia and not feel that you're going to be judge slightly different, or not feel that they're going to think that you can't do the things that everyone else can do. And that for me is one of the big things of why I struggle sometimes with saying it, because I don't want to be seen as different. I don't want to be judged because I learn a different way to most people. So that's a lot of the struggle for me with it.
And is there, I suppose, any advice that you would give to others that are in a similar position to yourself, having gone through that traditional educational system, been in different career areas, and maybe are now considering assessment? Is there any advice that you'd have for another Dave, or a Dave from a few years ago?
Well, I mean, the first bit of advice I would say is don't listen to anything that was told to you in the past. If the words tick stupid, I know that in my generation that's completely irrelevant in all this. The point is that if you have any doubt or if you're not sure, go and get a test. Go and find out as soon as you possibly can. Do the test, and then you'll have an idea where you go. And then if you do, and it turns out that you have dyslexia or dyspraxia, or I would say link in with the Dyslexic Association, get as much information as you can about how it affects and how you can support yourself. And then I would say the other bit for me would be to really own it. Like, it's a gift in one sense, is that I do things completely different to a lot of other people, and that's okay. I've accepted that now, and I know what works for me. And it has took me this long to figure out what actually works for me and why I struggled with other bits. And I've let it all go. And I don't see there's any difference or there's something wrong with me. I now I'm liberated in the fact that I know what it is and I know what works for me. But just don't wait any longer. Just go and get a test, get it, and then get as much information. And even link in, listen to the talks, listen to other people's. I was on a talk with that the Dyslexic Association were doing ages ago, and I had a little bit of a talk about my journey. And there was a woman on it who said to me, "I'm in the middle of doing my doctorate at the minute. I'm 50, and I only found out of dyslexia," and that gave me such comfort in the fact that there's other people in struggling the same way, but we can support each other as well if that helps. But just go and get an assessment or speak to the Dyslexic Association and just find out, what you can do next. I would say it would be our biggest winner.
Brilliant advice. And what about for, say, somebody who has always had an interest in going to college but has just put it off or just don't think that they deserve to be there? Do you have any advice for somebody who'd love to go to college or thinking about studying?
You absolutely deserve to be there,
Mm.
genuinely. I mean, I put it off for many, many years, and I'm now late 40s, and I'm only starting the journey of college, and I'm absolutely loving it. And I know how I can support myself around it. And just, you're liberated when you're in college if it's something that you want. I can't wait to get a degree and stand up there, and I'm going to stand beside everybody else. And it's like it really drives me because I did feel so lost for so long, and now college, they've been very supportive. You might have to structure things differently. You might have to do assignments slightly different, but you learn your style and go and keep going and don't come out of college ever until you've achieved what you want to achieve. But you deserve to be on the platform along with everybody else. And there is great supports and tools out there that will help you with all that. And if you do struggle with assignments or anything like that, there's different places you can link in as well for a bit of help and talk and guidance. But if I could go to college, considering that I didn't think I would be able anywhere near this, and do assignments and study and hold my own and hold more than my own, um, anyone can. I know that's cliche, but that's the truth. That's how I feel.
That's brilliant. Really good advice. And I suppose I have a controversial question now. But if you were the Minister of Education today, what would you change in terms of the way that we are teaching children and young people?
Well,
If you could
there's a
change,
question
I
now.
know, I thought of it there when we were chatting away, and I was like, I wonder now if you could change anything, the way the system of education is set up, or is there anything?
I'll start that again. I would say genuinely for me, I can only hold this on me and watching some of my children in school. And I think the education system is incredibly supportive and important. But for me, it doesn't work on many different fronts. One of the main reasons it doesn't work it doesn't support children who are creative. It doesn't support children who want to be actors or drummers or outside the norm of what they think a career path should be. And I think that's wrong. I think a lot of young kids go in with all these dreams and hopes, and a lot of it is sort of nearly taken out of them because now you have to be a doctor or a lawyer or this is your path. That's not a real career path. And I think that's a shame. I also think that it really favors people who are really focused on what they want to do and can absorb huge amounts of information. I could study for 2 years to do one exam and I wouldn't be able to absorb the information. And I know when I go in. So I think it should be a continual assessment. I think there should be a lot more awareness around diversity and different people who have learning styles. And I think they need to be supported a lot more. And I just feel that if it was an ongoing assessment and if it was a continual assessment, you'd have more of a chance to pick up things along the way and to learn. And someone said to me, and it was the best analogy I think I ever heard, doing the leave insert is the equivalent of being on a trial with a football club for 4 years and you have one match to make an impression. And if that match doesn't go well, your career is gone. And that's the best analogy I've ever heard. That's what a leave insert is like for me. If you struggle in the exam or if something goes wrong or you panic, in theory, the way it's structured, your whole potential career path is falling apart on that one week of exams, which I just think is wrong and it's too much pressure to put on people. So I could talk more on this, but I won't. But I feel that especially for people who are not academically minded or struggle with that, it allowed them just fade into the background and disappear out of school completely, and it's a shame. I think so many are getting lost along the way.
Well, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, and apologies for putting you on the spot there.
That's all right.
That
It's
was
actually
great.
quite passionate about it, to be honest. So I'm
Yeah.
glad you asked me that question. I
No.
do feel that school is
Yeah.
it's wrong on so many levels for so many kids fall through the cracks. And I listened to, and I know this is probably going slightly off tangent, but I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was about men in prison, right? And the conversation was just around kind of their journey and the commonalities with the amount of the men that were speaking who are currently in prison who struggled academically or had issues in school. That's where a lot of it started, and they were just forgotten about, and they felt kind of that they didn't belong, or that they were thick and stupid. Them words that were used, and it just really struck me that it could be one of the first places where you just feel that you don't belong for whatever reason.
Absolutely.
It's a
I
shame.
suppose like when we were talking about culture there earlier as well, like to have school should be that safe place for kids. Everyone's home situation is very different. Everybody's living in different
Mm.
circumstances. So I suppose it is, we're in school for so many years, and they're very pivotal years for children, for young people. So no, I completely get what you're saying, that if we could influence and have a supportive, nurturing environment, would outcomes for different people from different circumstances change? So it's definitely an interesting
And I love to the
thought.
last bit on that, I suppose, and I'll stop talking then after this.
No.
But the last bit on that, I suppose, as well is I'd love to see, and maybe it does exist, I don't know, but I'd love to see teachers in school who have dyslexia. I'd love to see lecturers, people who you could relate to if you were struggling, also that you could say, oh, they have. So you understand that just because you have dyslexia doesn't mean that you can't aspire to whatever you want to be in life.
Yeah.
And I think other role models like that in the education system that you can relate to and kind of go, all right, that would be hugely, I think, power. Or maybe it does exist. I don't know, but I haven't been in school in a long time. But
Yeah.
maybe it does. But I think the role modeling piece would be huge too.
Oh, absolutely. Because I suppose we can look to, the likes of Tom Cruise, the likes of Jamie Oliver, there's kind of Richard Branson, the famous dyslexic adults. But there's definitely something more powerful about it being your teacher, your neighbor, your boss, like just people that you see every day that can encourage and support. And we can think, right, God, fair play to them, they can do it. They're lecturing, they're doing whatever. I can follow that as well. So,
Like Keith, as I always said
yeah.
it before, Keith has been a huge influence to me. And
Mm,
I said this to him, I mean, hugely. When I was even thinking of going to college and I realized Keith was a lecturer and he told me his journey and then he's going on to do his doctorate, I was like, wow, like that really inspired me to start on my academic journey. And that's what I mean. Like and I've said this to him, he's made such an impact on my life just as regards a role model and an inspiration that it's inspired me to. And that's the type of he's really an inspiration that I hold in very high esteem.
yeah. And I suppose, what's your plan for after the degree? Would you consider postgraduate studies, or what's your plan?
I've I've limped my way through year one assignments and exams. So I do you know what I would love. I mean, listening to, and Keith isn't the type. His ego doesn't exist at all in the fact that using the words doctorate, he doesn't. He's not that type of person. But I think I'd love to. Um, I genuinely would. I mean, I'd like to go as far as I can, and not put a limitation on my studies. And I don't want to do it for the label of a doctor. That doesn't interest me at all to be called doctor. I would just want to do it to prove to myself and to like to inspire. Really, what a lot of I do is trying to inspire my kids and to show them walk the path, not just talk it. That you can achieve, if you want to. So I would like to go further, yeah. No, I mean, I could be the oldest person ever to qualify with a doctorate the way things are going, but that's okay. I think was it Edith Edgar? I think she was 50 or something, and she only started college. So an age is nothing. Uh,
Absolutely. Watch this space.
you never know. You never know.
That's brilliant. But Dave, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. And again, you have such valuable insights that I'm sure will be very relatable to other adults with dyslexia. So thank you so much
Thank you for
for your
having me. I'm
time. Really
delighted
appreciate
to talk
it.
here today. I really am delighted to talk here today. Thank you.